9, 8.
You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Devil's Advocates. I'm your host, Christopher, aka the Bronze Age Nerd. And today's going to be a little bit of an interesting show because I am flying solo tonight. Our esteemed co-host and producer Kyle is on vacation. So let me tell you a little bit about what I've been experiencing this weekend. This weekend, the fall finally came to the Pacific Northwest. It was a changing of the seasons. For us in the Pacific Northwest, that means a lot more rainfall than we've been seeing in the last few months. Obviously, leaves have been starting to change for a while now because they don't care about the weather. But we've had that fall vibe kind of coming in. And I've also had this experience happening where I am a Denver Broncos fan. And if you're an NFL fan, if you know anything about football, you know what happened to the Denver Broncos yesterday, courtesy of the Miami Dolphins. They lost the game 70 points. That's right, 70 points to 20. So it's been an interesting fall in a lot of ways this weekend for me. But we are changing the seasons. We are returning to normalcy a little bit here, moving into fall. And there's one special way in which that's really happened over the last 24 hours. That return to normalcy, that changing of the seasons, is that we are almost done with the writer's strike. That's right. There's a tentative agreement reached with the writer's strike. So that is one of the topics we're going to talk about tonight on Devil's Advocates. I have a few different topics to talk about, so stay tuned. Right after this, we'll be right back with Devil's Advocates. All right, welcome back to the show. Again, we're not bringing in producer Kyle if you're just now joining us because Kyle is on vacation, which is awesome. But I am going to take a second. You know what? I was a few minutes late. The reason why I was a few minutes late is to kind of give you some insight into the backstage here, and it's something I will talk about tonight. Is that I got back from Rose City Comic-Con this weekend, and I was there. Actually, I got this right here. I was there as press. So I was filming and recording and using my camera and all that stuff. So I was trying to get it hooked back up. And for whatever reason, whenever I hook up my camera to my computer, it wants to behave differently each time. But some people were here right on time or a little early, including Preston. Welcome back to the show, Preston. It's awesome to have you here. And we have John in the house. John, you were at Rose City Comic-Con, I believe, weren't you? I didn't have a chance to run into you, but I believe you were there. And let's see, maybe else jumping in here. We've got Round Guy, brutal couple points off of an NFL record. Yeah, it is absolutely, it's heartbreaking, guys. The other thing is I'm in 2 fantasy football leagues that I actually care about. I'm in 3, but 2 that I really care about. And in one of them, I am losing like 225 points to 80. So it's very similar to my real life team experience there. However, I'm probably going to get high score of the week, which has a monetary bonus in my home league. So I'm happy about that. Texas T Sweetener, howdy, how's it going? Thanks for coming to the show. Oh, Frog Brawler back in the show. Hey, everybody. And we got Canadian Survivalist. So, it's just me. I'm going to run a little bit more like one of my normal shows. So I will be interacting with you guys a lot. Feel free to drop your comments in the chat and we will go over all that fun stuff. So I mentioned at the top of the show in the open there that the writer's strike is facing a tentative end. It's presumed that the writer's strike is going to end, but really it's kind of sad that we don't have a lot of details to talk about with it because the actual details, the point by point agreement has to be ratified and they're not releasing the details of it. But it seems like both sides are pretty confident that this is the end of the strike, which is fantastic news. And John, you were there on Friday. Oh, I'm sorry you got sick, man. That's too bad. I would have loved to have run into you. That would have been awesome. I got a chance to run into a few people there at the show, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I wish I could have seen you again. Steve says, if the writer's strike is ending soon, does that mean I'll be getting messages in my fortune cookies again? Yes, I think that's what it means. However, it's going to be Rick and Morty style, unfortunately. If you know that reference, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. Oh, okay. Absolutely. And then Heads Up, Batman and Robin, number 3, 1 in 50, new DC artist. Oh, really? Who's the artist on that one? Canadian survivalist. The strike should keep going. Interesting. Hot take, Comic Journey. Hot take. Let me know what you think about that one. But yeah, it is one of those things where I think the strike has been good in some ways and this might be, to CJ's point there. It might be a good thing in a few ways, but I do almost kind of wish that it had kept going a little bit longer. I really wanted Hollywood to realize how much this was hurting them. So that's kind of where I would agree with what you were saying there. Oh no AI generated fortune cookies. That's bad. Kyle is not annoying. By the way, Kyle, and I think you guys kicked it off a lot, or hit it off. Not kicked it off. I guess that's a weird distinction there. You guys hit it off a lot better in your last interaction. I think you both enjoyed each other quite a bit. So don't pretend like you don't like Kyle. But Kyle is on vacation. He will be missing this show and another show in October, I believe. Either October or November. I can't remember the exact off the top of my head, but he sent me a message about it. And I'll be trying to have a co-host come on for that second show. I have a little more time to prepare for that. So the new artist is, oh boy, I'm going to butcher this name, Sakesha Ray. Hope I pronounced that correctly. So that is awesome that we have a new artist coming out. I'll have to definitely check out their work. The writers and actors need to feel more pain. The writers and actors need to feel more pain? Oh, I don't know about that one. I would say the studios need to feel the pain to encourage themselves to make better decisions is kind of how I feel about it. I have complicated feelings on it. So let's get into that a little bit. October. Okay. I think it's mid-October. I want to say that he'll be out for a date. The suits that want to replace them with AI should feel more pain. That's kind of, yeah, there we go. That's kind of the crux of where I'm at with this, but it's not just that. Let's talk about the MCU for a second, because for a lot of us in the comic book and nerd world, when we talk about the writer strike and the actor strike that goes along with that, a huge part of that conversation centers around the fact that there are superhero projects in development that a lot of us want to see. Now, of course, some of those were still in production because they were already written, so they could keep being worked on. Things like Invincible Season 2, for example. They've been plugging away at that. A lot of other stuff. But of course, there's been a lot of projects that have had to be put on hold or unable to get started. And that concerns a lot of things. So I'm going to use the MCU, and we could just as easily talk about the new DCU as a lens for this too. But I think the MCU is kind of the classic example. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, when we're talking about the writer strike, we do have to be fairly pedantic. So where is our annoying co-host technically? Yeah, I mean, so that is a good point. Maybe we need writers to replace Comic Journey. When it comes to the MCU, here's my thoughts on it. Ever since the snap, because we knew that Infinity War and Endgame were kind of more or less a package deal, right? Ever since the snap, the quality level has shot down. I don't think that's a bold or brave statement. I am not one of those people that thinks it's completely been in the toilet the entire time. You will see people out there saying that. I do think that the quality level has been down so far as to say that I went from being excited about every MCU project to I am seldomly excited about an MCU project. So that's kind of my level of interest in the MCU these days. I will say I still love seeing She-Hulk on the screen, seeing characters like Miss Marvel on the screen, getting those comic book characters that I've enjoyed reading. I have to go back to when I was a kid in the 80s and to some certain extent in the 90s as well, where superhero movies were usually bad, usually low budget, usually cheesy, and there were exceptions. Of course, there were exceptions. There's some really fantastic movies in that time frame as well. But I don't take for granted that when I was a kid, I just was like, I can't wait to see, a big Spider-Man movie or a big X-Men movie or, those characters that I loved growing up, Hulk, I wanted to see all that stuff on the silver screen. And I think we're privileged to have that happen, to live in that era, and spoiled because for a long time, it was very good. It was very good. Yeah, I've actually wondered about that. I mean, it could be AI hand photography. Sorry to bump the microphone there. AI hand photography and AI. I could see it happening. AI does make mistakes pretty often, like punctuation and spelling. It's not. You know what? I don't think it's that hot of a take for me because I agree with you. I think Endgame was definitely worth it. It was a good payoff, but I think Infinity War was better. I mean, you left the theater after watching Infinity War with this feeling of like, what is going to happen, right? Well, that's a hot take to me. No sympathy for the writers or the actors or the writers. And why is that? What do you think would happen if writers and actors weren't given what they need? I mean, to me, that's akin to saying that artists shouldn't be paid for their work. Plain and simple. The new Star Wars movies are better than I can't lie. They suck. Yeah. The Star Wars is definitely an interesting one to go down the rabbit hole on. The sequel trilogy got worse and worse as it went along for me. Absolutely. Nick says 13 watching and only 4 likes. That's a good point. Folks. Let's show Kyle the love for his vacation and let's throw some likes in there. But the point being, oh yeah, what's up? How's it going, K-pop? The point being is that, with the strike over, I think it's an interesting time for reflection. And again, I think the MCU is the perfect lens for that. So here's my take on what happened to the MCU. I think it turned into a cash cow. And I think it turned into a way for a cookie cutter type of formula to be done. We talked about Infinity War and Endgame. What did Infinity War and Endgame have that made them so damn good? They had stakes, not T-bones or filet mignon or New York strip. They had stakes as in deaths, drama. If you haven't watched MCU stuff recently, go back and watch the first 15 minutes of the Infinity War movies where Thanos is kicking Hulk's butt and Thor and the death of Loki. That is, there's drama, there's death, look, I think comic book movies should have levity in them. They should have humor for sure. And I think the MCU did a really good job of balancing action and humor. And as they went on, they were adding in things like drama. Black Panther did a really good job with that as well. So you got your action, your humor, and your drama. That's a really good blockbuster formula to have those things in equal measures. And as time went on in the MCU, we started to see humor and wackiness start to take over a little bit more. The unions are the reasons why I have sympathy. Interesting. Hey, how's it going, BBB Haunted Basement? So is that, I've had to ask, is that Better Business Bureau's Haunted Basement? Is that what that means? I'm super curious every time I see your name, and I have to finally ask. So when you start to get out of whack on that alignment of those three things, I really think you start to hurt that successful formula that we saw. And Thor Ragnarok is kind of a changing point in the MCU. And I actually personally, and maybe you didn't, maybe you loved it, whatever. I love Thor Ragnarok. I thought it was great. but it was silly. It was overly silly. That worked because it was the only one to be super overly silly. Ant-Man was a little silly too, a little on that silly side, but it had the balance of Evangeline Lilly's character and Michael Douglas's character. They were serious and they helped balance it out. And then you get to Thor: Love and Thunder, and it's just all silly. You're turning things like cancer into a punchline. You're turning things like Gore the God Butcher, this fantastic, complicated character portrayed by Christian Bale, into this really sort of weak movie villain. I mean, he actually wasn't weak on his own. It's just that he didn't get time to be fleshed out in that movie. So that made his dramatic impact much weaker by extension of that. Bears beats Bears in Battlestar Galactica is a great guess. Your name is Brett Bromgren. Okay, well, hi, Brent. Nice to meet you. That makes a lot more sense. Yes, yeah. Okay, look, Preston was making the comment essentially where I was going for me right there, and that is a great point. And then when you get those things out of whack, that to me is where you run into trouble. And then you have this issue of not setting up stories and characters correctly, losing some of the magic and the specialness of the interconnection of those characters. You've created this grand overarching narrative, and then you have these problems that keep coming, like, where are the Avengers? Cool, we have the Eternals. Where were they during any of that? Who are the Avengers? When does this particular project take place in the timeline? Those are problems that come up with pretty much every MCU film. And so where am I going with all this? I was hoping that putting some pressure on studios would cause them to play it a little less safe when they came back. What do I mean by that? I have a really good friend who's not a comic book fan, but enjoys spending time with me and is willing to go watch MCU movies with me. So that's how I've seen several MCU movies. And, he's become a fan of them over time, but he also was kind of done with them. And he was done with them long before most of us were that are in the comic book, world. He kind of came back for the build up to Infinity War Endgame, because that was just that was a cultural event, right? And he came back for that, but he fell off it again pretty quickly. The last movie he enjoyed, and I kind of agree with this, is Guardians of the Galaxy 3, was very good. Why was Guardians of the Galaxy 3 very good? It's because James Gunn kind of apparently just went off and did what he wanted to do with that movie, which was a continuation of what he wanted to do in 1 and 2. By the way, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is a pretty weak entry in the MCU, in my opinion, as well. So I can't just say that he has carte blanche to do no wrong. I don't think that's true. But when directors are given a vision and they're allowed to stick to it, it generally works out well. However, for all we know, that's why Taika Waititi made Love and Thunder. Maybe he was given that free reign to do whatever he wanted. But I think a studio needs to play it less safe. They need to be willing to take chances. A film like Guardians of the Galaxy, that only happens because you can't bring in the X-Men. You can't bring in the Fantastic Four. There's licensing rights. Spider-Man wasn't quite there yet with that deal with Sony. And you take this really extreme C-list group of characters. No offense to Guardians of the Galaxy fans of the past. I know that there are some out there, but they never were a big deal. And he brings it to the forefront and says, no, these are the stars. And they're silly, they're funny, but there's also drama. The beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is an extremely sad moment. It shapes the events of what Peter Quill is like for the rest of his life. It tells you a story about who he is. Preston says, I wasn't really happy about Namor, but I thought Wakanda Forever was good, just not to the level of the first Black Panther. That's an interesting one. I mean, and beat by beat, Wakanda Forever for me was, it was disappointing. I wouldn't say it was bad. It just, I didn't feel like after watching it, like it had much of a point. And and again, part of that is by now with other MCU projects, I would have expected to see where are we going with this? What's happening? What's the point? Get a teaser of Riri showing up in something else. Get a teaser of what's going to happen with Wakanda Forever is still a little new enough that I won't spoil the ending of that movie. But there's a very seemingly important scene at the end of that movie that we haven't had any follow up on. And it's okay to let things cook and marinate. Totally, that's totally fine. But there's a lot of threads that are plucked in that movie that we have no follow-up to at all whatsoever. Generally speaking, MCU pictures have been good at that, as something happens near the end of that movie and it crisscrosses into this other movie. You have things like Black Widow going from being in the Iron Man camp of things to all of a sudden she's in the Captain America plot line. And that's a very natural crossover in the way that it was done. And I think that Wakanda Forever kind of missed the mark with some of that stuff. But the point being is that I'd hoped that putting some of this financial pressure on these players in the industry, like Disney, like Netflix, like the streamers out there, all these different movie and TV show shot callers. I'd hoped we'd put a little pressure on them to create better products for us. It should be quality over quantity, in my opinion. And it's something that I do hope we get. I have a lot of hope and little faith in James Gunn's DCU. I really want it to be good. I really want it to take its time. I think some of the approach and the world building that they're talking about doing with the DCU is fascinating. The other minor projects like animated projects are actually going to be connected to what's going on, instead of that weird patchwork that we have with the MCU where it was like, well, is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really canon? The Netflix stuff with Daredevil and Iron Fist, and obviously now we know they're bringing all that back, but at the time it was weird. We didn't know what was happening. And so I'm hoping to avoid a lot of that with the DCU. So I have hope, but little faith. I've been burned. I don't want to get my hopes up too much with the new endeavor like that. Round Guy says, I didn't see Thor, Love, or the second Black Panther, so can't speak on them. I enjoyed some of Black Adam and didn't see the second Shazam. Actually, I can, on the DC side of things, I can agree with you. I enjoyed some of Black Adam, especially the stuff with, Dr. Fate and all that. I mean, that's really awesome. I think they could have done a better job with Black Adam's character himself into selling the anti-hero thing, and frankly, be a better villain instead of this weird anti-hero. That would have been cool. And then I haven't seen the second Shazam yet either. I've heard mixed things about it. I like the first Shazam. I like Zachary Levi as Shazam. I think that was fun. I think the actors and writers should be just as accountable as the studios for the garbage being released. Well, to an extent, but just as accountable. That's the problem. I think they're accountable, but the studios are the ones greenlighting the scripts from certain actors. They're the ones requesting script changes. They don't have to go ahead with a bad script. It's their power to control that. They can say, we're not going to make this movie. We're going to make, Y movie instead of X movie. And then the actors, it's a tough one. It's a really tough one with the actors, because I think the acting has gone downhill with the MCU. You could make the argument, and I would agree with you, that the MCU's biggest problem is it has a lack of charisma. We had an extremely charismatic cast with Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, with Chris Evans as Captain America. That surprised the hell out of me. Chris Pratt, Scarlett Johansson, they all did a fantastic job. Why am I blanking on the Loki actor's name? He did an amazing job as well. I don't know why. I can't remember off the top of my head. A lot of people involved in the MCU did a really great job. And some of those people are still around. But also a lot of the newer performances, a lot of the newer characters, they don't have that gravity, that charisma that makes me want to see everything they're doing. Tom Hiddleston. Why could I not remember that? With especially Loki 2 coming out, which I'm excited for. I really like season 1. We're going to take a couple more comments, and then we're going to take a little break, and I'll move on to the next part of the show. Round Guy says, I can't pay $40 for a movie. I'm just going to be pissed about, I assume you mean at the end. Yeah, I totally can relate to that. If you like what you see, please hit that thumbs up. Hey, that'd be awesome. 20 likes or more would be great. The Snow White situation, I think that there's a lot more going on there than the general scope of what's going on in Hollywood in totality. But yeah, the live action Disney stuff has become strange for sure. But it's not all the studio's fault in that case. Some of it's the public's fault. I really like Doctor Strange 2 because of Scarlet Witch, and that's the closest thing we've gotten to mutants in the MCU. Doctor Strange 2 is really cool. It was really cool. I was ultimately kind of disappointed with it personally, but it was very cool. That to me was a good example of, I almost would have rather have seen that be a TV show. And like, for example, Moon Knight, I almost would have rather have seen been a movie. I've kind of gone back and forth on that. Like WandaVision may have been a really cool movie, ended up being a TV show, which for WandaVision thematically totally works. No, but CJ, if you don't know about Hollywood accounting and what the studios are doing to the actors in some of those cases, you should read up on it. I think you can talk about actors and writers giving money back after studio heads start that trend. Lead by example, right? That's a fantastic point. Now getting to 16 watching and 10 likes. Can we get a few more? A few more likes would be awesome. So that's kind of, I'm going to kind of wrap up a little bit with, because a lot of this is speculation based. We don't really know the details of the contract that's going to be worked out, the agreement that's going to be worked out with the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild. But look, I'm excited. We can get back to getting some content made. Hopefully it changes the balance of power in Hollywood a little bit. And more importantly, hopefully the question of actors' likenesses being used in perpetuity without their express approval, that's a very scary future that could happen. I'm okay with things like actors being used in ways that they agree to be used in, like if, for example, James Earl Jones gave his blessing and he did a bunch of recording to have his voice be able to be synthesized for use as Darth Vader in the future. James Earl Jones' voice is so unique and so special, and something that it's intrinsic to the character of Darth Vader. If we have future Darth Vader portrayals, which we will because it's Star Wars, I don't want to hear anybody but James Earl Jones. And the idea that we'll get more of that is fantastic. But he agreed to it. He thought it was a good idea. If he didn't, I would feel pretty disgusted by it if he was being used without his approval, his express approval. But tell you what, we are going to take a break, and right after that break, we are going to talk about a couple other things that I think are pretty exciting. One of them is extremely exciting, and one of them might seem mundane, but it actually has a lot going on with it. So we'll be back right after a break here in a second.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds, a promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey, and behind every page there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
According to a statistic that I just made up, people spend 4 hours a day changing the television channel. People who watch The Experience don't do that. Save yourself a ton of time by tuning into The Experience and enjoying our new original programming 7 days a week. And then tell your friends. Think about the money they could save on batteries in the remote alone just by tuning into The Experience. Find out more by scanning the QR code below. Go follow The Experience on TikTok at @the_EXP1 or scan the QR code on the screen. Our TikTok is like everywhere else we are, except you only have to deal with us for a minute. Seems like a win-win to me.
Hey, welcome back to Devil's Advocates. We're here today talking about a couple different topics. Again, it's a little bit different show because co-host and producer Kyle is on vacation. So it's going to be a little bit different format. In the first part of the show, talked a little bit about the MCU and its relation to the potential end of the Writers and Actors Guild strikes that were kind of in the news cycle recently. The second part of the show here, I have two topics I'm going to cover. And I'm going to talk about my experience at Rose City Comic-Con first, and use it as a lens to talk about a couple different things. But the second part of the segment of the show here, I'm going to talk about comic book organization. And I had a much longer show planned around that idea. It's a little tough to talk about, debating styles of organization and how you alphabetize your comics or how you store your comic books when it's a solo show. So if you have opinions on that, kind of start formulating them, be ready to write them into the chat, because in about, maybe 10 or 15 minutes here, we're going to start talking about that part of that for the end of the show, and maybe kind of help build out a longer show that we could do in the future about the idea of how to organize your comic books. But I did go to Rose City Comic-Con this weekend, and I want to talk about that just a little bit. It's fresh on my mind. It's all I can really think about, right? So it's something I kind of feel like I need to talk about. Rose City Comic-Con, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a kind of a regional con. It takes place in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon is the Rose City. And it's the second biggest con here in the Northwest, the first being Emerald City Comic-Con. Although there's a new con I went to this summer. It's been around for a couple of years now, though. It's called Washington State Summer Con, and it happens in Puyallup, which is kind of where the fairgrounds are on the west side of the state. And it's a big con as well. So that one had a lot of celebrities, a lot of creators. In fact, maybe even more than Rose City had. But Rose City was a big show. It had guests like Adam Hughes and Arthur Adams. It had celebrity. We were talking about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It had Zoe Saldana was there. Karen Gillan. A lot of different celebrities were there too. Of course, I'm never as big on the celebrity side of things. And when it comes to cons, I would have loved to have met both of those people, but you're paying a lot of money for it and waiting in huge lines. So what I wanted to talk about with Rose City Comic-Con is actually a couple different causes that have come up. One of them, and I'm going to paste a link into chat here, is about a young woman that I met at the con. I've been hearing about her a lot recently. And I had the good fortune to meet her at the con and get to hang out with her for a little bit, had dinner with her and a bunch of other people in the comic book community on Saturday. And I'm going to paste a link in the chat for a GoFundMe. So this link is for Jennifer, and she is known as Comics Will Break Your Heart on Instagram. And she was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of cancer at a fairly young age. And she's currently undergoing treatment, and hopefully things are going fantastically there. We wish her the best, but those treatments are expensive. The campaign is called Keep Jennifer Reading, And I think it's a great cause, and I think she's a great person. And I really would encourage you to check it out. Go find her on Instagram, go support her if you want to, or go check out her profile at least, and just investigate, do your own homework there if you want. But that is something that I highly recommend checking out, and I think it's a great cause, and she seems like a great person. So I'd really highly recommend that, and I just wanted to kind of take a second to talk about that. The other thing I want to talk about with Rose City is that I'm unabashedly sort of going to talk about this. I started my first kind of real forays into kicking off a charity event that I'm doing, where I talked to a bunch of creators and some vendors there about helping to support. So on Veterans Day, on 11/11, I'm going to do my second annual Heroes for Heroes event, which is an event I do where I take 100% of all the profits and I donate those to Mission 22, which is a veterans charity that's founded by veterans. They do a lot of things to support veterans and their families with some of the unique challenges and struggles that they face. But the primary focus that they're known for is for helping prevent veteran suicide, which, if you're not familiar, is an extremely serious problem for veterans. They are much, 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 much higher of a risk of committing suicide, sadly, due to some of the unique struggles they face. So that is something that I think it's a great cause. I've reached out to a lot of veterans in the comic book community. Something I've known for a while now is that there are a lot of veterans in the comic book community. I really wanted to go out and talk to a bunch of them and make sure that I picked a good charity that they support, that they think has their head on, screwed on their shoulders right. And they all universally recommended a couple of them. The one that got the most support was Mission 22. And so, and they're an amazing organization. So yeah, thank you, Jay, for putting the link into the chat for Mission 22. I'm currently in the process of filling out the forms to become an official charity through Mission 22. There'll be an event page on their website. And why I want to talk about this. So I talked to a bunch of creators. Some of the big names there are continuing to research, and we're in discussions about them contributing. But I will say I have some really cool stuff. I have an original sketch from Ron Garney that he very graciously donated. I have I will show you that in a second, actually. This is close. This is so heavy. This is an omnibus, a New 52 omnibus. Greg Rucka donated this, and he signed it inside. So that's really cool. That'll be one of the things up for auction. And he also did a Lazarus book as well. So those are both from Greg Rucka. That's really awesome. Randy Emberlin donated like 10 signed prints. Randy is the co-creator of Carnage. So like Spider-Man and Carnage prints. Chris Warner, who did a lot of work for Dark Horse. He was an editor. He worked for Marvel. He worked a lot with Randy Emberlin, and he did Doctor Strange. He did Predator is kind of his kind of thing. He's probably the most known for Barbed Wire and Predator. He donated like 5 signed Predator sketches he did that are, they're the cover of that Predator #1 book. So just Arthur Adams. Oh my gosh, you got to see this. Gotta see what Arthur Adams is giving up here. This is really cool. This is from the X-Men special edition art, and he signed it on the bottom there. So that's going to be one of the items up. See if I have. Oh, here's that Predator I was talking about. So Chris Warner signed those on the bottom. There's about 5 of those. Here's some of Randy's prints he donated that are signed. I want to show you that sketch, though, because I think it's really awesome. If I can find it. Where are you? Here we go. Check that out. Again, that's from Ron Garney. Badass Conan, the sketch, original art that'll be up there. He was super kind. I got a couple of prints here he signed as well. There's a Berserker one in here. We'll have that up there as well. So, point being, that's kicking off on November 11th. And that's going to be something that I hope people come out and support. I have a lot of irons and a lot of fires about ways to be a part of this. There's a few people that have committed to things, but I'm not going to, because they're not in my hands. They're not fully tangible. And I understand I'm talking to very, very busy individuals. So in some cases they might have to, back out, or that maybe their time won't allow them to commit. So I don't want to force anybody into getting their name put out there. But I think you guys are gonna be pretty excited about some of the participation that I could bring to bear on this. People have asked, if they can donate comics for the auction. I'm going to put up a lot of my stuff as well, of course. But I know a comic shop that I work with. I don't really work with them. I'm friends with them. I see them at conventions and I talk to them. We never really worked on anything, I guess. But they're going to donate some slabs. Last year we had lots of crazy donations. We had sketch covers from Trish Forstner, Chin Potter, Randy had sent some stuff in. There's going to be a ton of stuff. So it's going to be a big deal. And I really hope you can be there to be part of it. I had to promote it because having the experience of going around Rose City Comic Con, I'm not going up to a creator is tough for me. I hate meeting people that, most people wouldn't call them celebrities, but in my eyes, they're celebrities. Meeting those people can often be uncomfortable for me. And then a couple years ago, I started doing YouTube. And so I would, I'm there as press. I'm kind of working this in like, hey, do you want to do an interview? Like, can we talk? And I've had some excellent opportunities come up because of that. Still some that are sort of on the horizon still. Some really cool names I'm sure you guys are going to love to watch me talk to. But it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to ask for that kind of thing. And then to go a step further and say, hey, I know that you are super busy making money at this convention, but I just have to ask you, are you willing to help support this cause that in many cases they haven't heard of? But it absolutely floored me. Meeting Ron Garney, I was like 15 seconds into talking to him, and he's like digging through like, hey, take this original Conan sketch. I was speechless. I was just like, oh my God, thank you. Like, that's incredible. Randy Emberlin has been super supportive the last couple of years for it. All these people that are just absolutely awesome. And I mean, of course, some that are just like, nope, no thanks. And I get it, right? Like, it's just how it is. And there's a couple that were there that, are kind of on the bigger name side of list of things, and seeing if they're able to come through, it's going to be fascinating. But just a really good atmosphere, a really good convention. I know some people just want like, how was the convention? It was a really good convention. I picked up some cool comic books. I did not get a chance to meet everybody I wanted to. Unfortunately, I missed out on meeting Stan Sakai, Sora Song, Simon Bisley, Ben Temple-Smith, a few others that I missed out on meeting, which is too bad, but their lines were just very busy. And I was trying to do a lot in a short amount of time. It's a tough one, Round Guy. For the most part, I agree with you. It can be a really, really scary proposition. You never want to walk away from somebody whose work you enjoy and love, and then feel like, maybe I shouldn't be such a big fan of that person. I've had 2 negative interactions with creators that I was a fan of. Both of those situations, I'm pretty sure that they just were having bad days or bad shows. I was talking to, if you guys know Comics with Bueller, hung out with him on Saturday, and I will not say the person that he was saying this about, but there was somebody that we were with together at a different convention, and he provided some backstory to why that person was kind of grumpy at the show we were at, which was, it was funny to get the extra level of detail. Like, oh, that's why they were in a bad mood. I think there was more going on than even that, probably, but it is interesting. Hey, I'm glad you got to meet Sarah. That's awesome. Sora. Sorry, not Sarah, Sora. That's great. But it was a great show. I think if you were there for some of the celebrities, you probably had a really good time. It looked like everybody doing the celebrity events and the photo ops and all that, it was just amazing for those people. For the comic side of things, I think most of the creators I talked to had a really good Saturday, and they had a pretty good Friday, and then Sunday they were pretty disappointed. Or they were tired and ready to get out of there. But it was a good show. I think that the thing I like about Rose City Comic Con is even on its busiest day, Saturday, they had about 40,000 people there, tickets sold throughout the day. So probably less than that actually showed up. But there definitely was still plenty of room compared to other shows I've been at, seen, experienced. You know, it was still pretty good. It's a small show, relatively speaking, but it's in a smaller space, so it doesn't feel tiny. And then I know, John, you had said something about Washington State Summer Con earlier. I know you had said you think it's getting maybe bigger than Rose City. I kind of agree with that. I was trying to scroll to find your comment. I agree with that. I think that Washington State Summer Con has definitely become a huge thing too. And they had some amazing guests this year as well, especially on the celebrity side. I just don't get excited about meeting people. To me, it's like a rock concert. I would rather buy the tape. Oh, that's fair. I mean, it's not for everybody. And yeah, like Comic Journey said, they are just people. 100% true. It is something where you do have to be, you have to have expectations going in that are realistic, right? When you're meeting these people, I think that's an important part of it. Anyways, so a little shameless self-promotion, but for a good cause. So hopefully you'll forgive me. But also on the other side, we did have another topic I wanted to talk about, which is comic book organization. And again, this is something that I think will probably be discussed again at a future date. Maybe I'll have a few people. I'll thank you very much, Jay, for finding that comment from John. I appreciate that comment, John, too. I think this is one of those things where I believe like a roundtable conversation about this is good. But it's one of those things it's really probably one of the most boring topics. I have to acknowledge Frog Brawler here. We've had an exchange before about this. Gemini mailers should have this small flap on the outside. And it's okay to have your own opinions about things, even if you're wrong. Do I have a Gemini handy? I don't have a Gemini handy for once. I don't have a Gemini sitting next to me. I think that the large side should be on the outside. It makes it a more clean package, and I think that there's less chance of the flap getting caught. But that is a very small quibble. But yeah, when it comes to comic book storage and alphabetization, we're kind of it's comic book organization is really the grand topic. And I think what's interesting about it is it's kind of like what Frog Brawler was just talking about, and we're kidding. It realistically doesn't matter too much, but it is that thing where it's like the toilet paper roll with the over, or you could be weird and have it go under, right? But there are people that they fight for this way or the other way or whatever they want. And comic book supplies, comic book organization, alphabetization is definitely that way too. Like an example I can think of is there are people that think modern comic books, the real answer, life hack. The real answer is often subjective to these things, but there's some of the things that have real implications. So my favorite go-to example for this is that there is a camp of people, and if you're one of these people, I don't mean to offend you, because I think it's largely okay. As long as you're putting a comic in a bag and a board, it's largely okay. But there are people that take a modern comic book, like one you would go buy off the shelves on Wednesday, and you'll put it in a Silver Edge bag and board. And the reason that's usually given for that, to me, that is strange. But the reason that's usually given for that is, well, you get more board around the comic book. I have a problem with that. The problem for me is that the comic book slips and slides up and down, left and right, because it has too much room in that bag and board now. Now, I do like, I want there to be a border around the comic book of comic book board. 100%. See if I have a good example of that right here. That do you have comic books handy? So one second. So here's an example. One of the books I picked up 22 Mark Jeweller's G.I. Joe variants. So this is fine for me right here. You got some board showing on either side. The problem with this to me is that this is like a standard bag and board, right? And I rebagged and boarded this. I don't have my preferred bags and boards handy, but this was better than what it came in. That's the problem with that, is you don't have any cushion on the bottom. And move those aside here. Now, my favorite storage method are E-Gerber Mylites and fullbacks. And so this is, obviously Ultimate Comic Spider-Man #1. You see the board, even if I turn it upside down, it's held in place there by a little bit of pressure, right? And you have board on all four sides. This is also a very high quality board. It's a fullback. It's a little thicker. Well, it's a lot thicker than your standard boards. And the Mylar is also non-reactive to the paper inside, so it lasts a lot longer. I think pretty much all the examples I have here, they're all. I did all these in that same kind of, you got white around all the edges right there. And that white means that's board, that's protected. So if you're moving a box, short box, long box, doesn't matter. The comic books move a little bit in there usually. And I want there to be some protection on each side of that. My favorite boxes, by the way, I have way too much stuff on top of it to move it to show you right now. I actually have moved away from like the standard comic box. Like BCW makes those, and they're fine. They're totally fine. They're industry standard, right? And of course, a ton of other companies make that same style of box. But I use the Gemini boxes now, the short boxes. I don't use any long boxes anymore. My back doesn't like the idea of moving them. If I had a more like permanent or slider type situation where I could put them in, that'd be great. The Gemini boxes are a little wider, and the handles are a lot more reinforced, and there's no gaps for comic books to slide into inside the box. And there's no, like on the edge of most like the BCW style boxes or other boxes like that, there's a half a flap that comes up, right? And if you put comics can put pressure on that and start to bend. But on the Gemini boxes, it's all flush. So if you have a comic book facing right up against it, it's just one straight line of cardboard. So I really like those. I also have a right next to me, you can't see it right off camera here. There's a legal size filing cabinet, which I have S through Z of my alphabetical comic books. That's how much it can hold, my non-slabbed raw comic books. And I love those. They're just heavy. They're hard to move. To me, they're a better solution. It's easier to get to the comic books. Let's get to some of the comments real fast. Comic Journey is big on thank yous. He says a Gemini mailer should always have a thank you letter included. And you know, that's a fine practice. You're not wrong there. In a lot of ways, but to me, using a Gemini mailer to ship your comic books is a thank you, and make sure the comic books inside are a thank you, and the extra comic books can be a thank you as well. It has to be over the top. Nobody wants mullet toilet paper. That's great. Coincidentally, Frogweller says, I spent most of my weekend rebagging my X-Men books, and in the process, they migrated into those plastic BCWs. Yeah, I have. I don't know how well you can see it, but right there, all my slabs are in black plastic BCW bins. I like those. I like those very much. So you do that. You do that with the Silver Age. I think that's when you were, John. You do the Silver Age bags and boards for your comic books. Yeah, you can get blended edges that way. That's good. Round guy, I just use silver modern bags, boards. Sometimes those are out of stock, so I use Walmart grocery bags. All the same. There you go. Nick says, thanks for everybody stopping by. I really appreciate y'all being here, and thank you to everyone who hit that thumbs up. I appreciate it as well. Thanks a lot, Nick, for popping the show. It's always nice to have you here watching. Big props to Nick Brucci for all he does over here. But yeah, I think those are some kind of like, those are the things I want to talk about. So again, I don't know if Jay might be able to pop that link back into chat for our topic suggestions, but that's the kind of stuff that, you know, think about those sort of questions for like organizing comic books and how you want them organized. Do you want, you know, Kyle and I or a future co-host I might have, like when Kyle's on vacation or something like that. Again, there's one more week coming up like that here in a few weeks. Do you want us to talk about things like Mylar versus regular polypropylene bags or OPP bags, like Comic Pro line, what they offer with their bags? Do you want us to talk about alphabetization, which we didn't even get to tonight, but that's a very interesting one. And before you say, what do you mean? I just alphabetize my comics. Well, there's people that alphabetize their comics in different ways. And I'm just going to give you a couple quick examples. One way is they do it by publisher first. And they say, here's all my DC, and then it's alphabetized A to Z. Or here's all my Flash comics, any comic that has the Flash in it or whatever, and then they're all alphabetized A to Z, or they're not in some cases. Or you have people that say, everything's A to Z. I don't know what you're talking about. But then I ask them, well, what do you do with G? And they, what do you mean? It's like, well, think about the letter G. Because I've used a lot of different pieces of software that organize or database comic books. And you'll be surprised where you see G period I period space Joe, G.I. Joe, show up in different pieces of software depending on how they alphabetize. For example, CLZ, the collector's app. CLZ puts G.I. Joe, G period I period space Joe, before everything else in the alphabet. There are some people that would say, well, GI stands for general infantry. So I would put it where general would go on the alphabet, GE, GEN, you know, etc. And then there are other people that say, well, it's GI. So I would put it GI. So like after a title like Ghost, for example. It's fascinating to see what different people have chosen. I will tell you that I basically changed my alphabetizing structure around somewhat based on CLZ, because I have everything logged into CLZ, and well, it's way out of date now. That's the problem with using an app to organize your comic books, is if you don't update it, it's not very useful anymore, and then you have to go back and redo it, which is what I have to do. But I changed my alphabetizing based on CLZ because I wanted to be able to find something in my app and then go to the corresponding spot of where it would be in my collection. Frog Brawler says, G period should go before GA. That's interesting. Yeah. Hey, that's a great suggestion, by the way, a Comic Journey. I would love for you to go put that on the forum if you're willing to do that. That would help us all be on the same page. My co-host would know what's going on too. I would appreciate that. But either way, we'll take that under advisement. It's a great topic. But yeah, G should go before GA. That's an interesting. That's kind of what a lot of software would agree with you on. But then it gets even more interesting because you have subtitles of G.I. Joe, right? Like, do you go? So there's G.I. Joe, which really is G.I. Joe, a real American hero, if you want the Marvel run, volume 1. But then there's G.I. Joe, a real American hero by Marvel Special Missions. So does Special Missions G.I. Joe by Marvel go right after G.I. Joe, real American hero? Or would a later G.I. Joe, a real American hero, which I think was the IDW run, maybe I'm wrong about that, would that go between the two, right? It's really like weird stuff like this that I love to know what people think about it. And part of the reason why is because I've had to do this professionally before, indexing and alphabetizing for different jobs I've had. And there are different accepted not nomenclatures. There's another word for it, but ways to index your alphabet, and there are different standards. It's very interesting. I'm still in the dark ages with Excel spreadsheets, but well, I mean, you can do a lot with Excel. That's for sure. Rail Guy says I don't put that much thought into it. Run and number ASM volume 1, ASM volume 2, and that one's an easy one. Well, I didn't ask you to put it on the forum. I asked you to put it on the form. So again, spelling and punctuation matter. The lesson for the night. Perfect for the topic we ended on with comic book alphabetization and organization and supplies. And it's kind of like this whole catch-all product category. That said, you know what? We are over time tonight, and without the co-host and without a clear direction to keep going, I'm probably going to end the show here. I do think that there's a lot of topics around this that we could talk about in the future, but that's not all. There are a lot of things we could talk about on the Devil's Advocates. And you know what? He's not a form guy. He's a chat guy. Oh, that's awesome. Just like Jay had highlighted here, we do have that form that you can go, not a forum, a form. We do have a Discord. You could go join that as well, by the way. You could come chat with us over there. We'd love to see that. But you can fill out the form and get a suggestion into us to do on a show. We love taking those suggestions. And this is the perfect troll move right there. But we'll talk about any topics you want. And since I do have a show coming up that we're going to need to fill in a different co-host for Kyle on, it gives us the opportunity, if you have a show topic that is perfect for a certain guest, it gives me some time to see if we could line that guest up. Something to do with, comic investing or trends over time. Well, maybe Mickey from Swaggle House Comics would be a great guy to talk to about that. And maybe we could put out some feelers to get him on the show. That kind of thing, right? Like try to think about what kind of topic you'd want brought up. Like CJ talked about comic book collectible insurance. That's something that I know a couple people that might be great to talk about that with as well. The green eggs and ham joke. So yeah, kind of consider those sort of topics you want to see us talk about in the future. And then of course, Kyle and I could also have a third member join us, a guest. It's something we have been talking about a lot, about who would be the right people to have on for certain topics. So anyways, the point being, I would love to hear from you guys about that kind of stuff. Kind of to recap, there is the GoFundMe link for Keep Gen Reading. I'm going to throw that in the chat one more time here, just for your consideration. I think it's a great cause. And then we do have Heroes for Heroes coming up here on 11/11, and I'll be talking about that more as time goes on. And you just gave him an idea, CJ. Oh, that's great. So yeah, and Mission 22, which Jay just dropped the link in for chat as well. I appreciate that. So that's the kind of stuff we have coming up on the horizon. Next week we'll be back with a whole new topic. Kyle should be back for that show as well, so that'll be really fun to talk about. Until then, I just want to thank everybody for watching all the shows here over on the EXP. If you haven't hit like and subscribe, please take a second to consider doing so. It really does help us out. Don't forget to hit the bell, turn notifications on as well, because that will notify you when we're going live. I mentioned earlier, you could join our Discord server. We have a lot of topics that come up in there for all the different kinds of shows over on the EXP. For things you want to see in claim sales, you name it. There's a lot of cool shows coming up here. Don't forget to check out Nick Barucci's original art shows on Fridays and so many other great shows you will see listed down below when you subscribe. Thanks for being here tonight, everybody, and have a fantastic one. We'll catch you next week. Until then, keep reading comics.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.